Horror games can have it rough. Due to the nature of video games, it can be difficult to maintain a certain level of fear. There's a few factors here, one of them being that saves, checkpoints, and replay areas. Death is usually inconsequential, ignoring of course the grisly end of a beloved character, though even that can be debated with the existence and popularity of death compilations. When a player dies, they're usually hurled back a few minutes into the past to replay the same situation. Not only does the player know what's coming, but it also gives them time to recognize quirks or what triggers the AI to make certain responses. This eliminates ambiguity, and as a result, gets rid of the horror the game was attempting to present. Imagine walking down a hallway not knowing if a jump scare was going to happen or not. Now imagine going through that same hallway, but a jump scare were to happen in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm sure that jump scare was no longer scary to you. I mean, it might still have been, seeing that there was an anticipation towards it, but it's probably not as scary as not knowing entirely. This is a hard problem to remedy, but let's brainstorm a few ideas. If death were to become permanent, it would heighten the tension in any encounter, but can make the whole process that much more frustrating when death occurs. It may also push the player harder to figure out the AI, so that they could avoid said death. This idea also has the flaw of how much time needs to be invested. If a player were to die 5 hours into a game and be forced to restart, would it be expected for them to play again, or just quit? Roguelites, which use this general idea, usually only last 1 to 2 hours at tops. A horror roguelite doesn't exist, and if it does, it hasn't really risen to prominence yet. Having said all of this, I think there is one game that strikes a good balance, even if it did botch the landing a bit. That game is Zombi, mostly known as ZombiU. ZombiU is probably most famously known for being Nintendo's flagship We Also Release Adult Games launch title for the Wii U. That is kind of a shame, because it had lots of fresh ideas. ZombiU's death mechanic in particular is incredibly fresh. ZombiU has 2 game modes, Survivor mode, which takes that one life idea to heart, to mixed results, more on that later, and normal difficulty, which allows the player to die and continue playing in a unique fashion. Player characters are randomly generated, their designs, their names, their genders, and their old job professions. These small details give off a sense of uniqueness and value, since no other character will ever be like this one. If said character were to die, then that character is gone forever, and a new one is created. The player can then go find their old body, which is either a zombie or a corpse, to try to recollect their stuff. This not only adds bonus risk since the player already died to the obstacles at hand, but now they must fight their corpse with presumably less gear. If the player has friends, then the same zombie will spawn in their world, and they can potentially steal the gear as well. A fun Dark Souls-like mechanic that only makes it sadder since you must kill off your old friend. One of the great parts about ZombiU though is its actual zombies. Zombies are a monster that has lost all mystery and ambiguity. Due to its popularity in the past 2 decades, there is little left to the imagination. Ubisoft understood that and instead tried to instill fear in another way: tension. Zombies are extremely durable. Many will oftentimes take 3 to 4 hits with a cricket bat to kill. They will also take multiple shots to the head with pistols, submachine guns, and assault rifles. The one-shot guns are the Magnum, shotgun, and carbine rifles, which feature rarer ammo types than the previously mentioned. The player character can only survive around 5 to 6 swings of damage, something that sounds generous at first until I tell you about the corpse lunge. The corpse lunge is a slow grab attack that every zombie has. If it connects with the player, then it is an instant death. Every zombie can do this. This threat alone can turn any interaction with a zombie into a dangerous one. There is no better example of this than the first major encounter in Buckingham Palace. There are 4 to 5 normal zombies and the first time the player is introduced to spitting zombies. Players will often attempt to rush the ranged zombie with a melee weapon, and instead of being killed by the oncoming horde, they often die by panicking when fighting the ranged zombie and getting bit. But the reason I mention all this is because this is one of the few recent cases where zombies are actually durable and a threat. Let's look at some of the recent zombie games. World War Z, Days Gone, Dead Rising 3, State of Decay 2, just to name a few. Something common between these games is that zombies die immediately and pretty much instill no fear into the player on their own. They often allow the player to have a more carefree approach to the gameplay. But ZombiU forces the player to slow down. Getting surrounded is a death sentence, and like I said, any one zombie can kill a player. This forces the players to slow down and play the game the way the developers intended them to, which leads into ZombiU's biggest asset: atmosphere. The slower, more methodical approach allows designers to hide zombies in places where players will be surprised, like here and here. ZombiU's color palette is generally gray, and I believe this actually works to its advantage. Post-Apocalyptic London is a dirty and grimy city with garbage, corpses, and soot lining its streets. There was a point in my most recent playthrough where I was questioning why some of the parts of the map are in the night and while others are in broad daylight, and you can easily swap between the two, noticing the time change. I thought this initially was a developer oversight, but then realized that the darker parts of the map weren't nighttime, they were just covered in a thick layer of smoke. If the player were to stand still at many different points in the game, they would be able to hear the distant sound of the city lit on fire. Speaking of audio, ZombiU has many examples of great sound design. For the most part, ZombiU is a fairly quiet game. That ambient city noise is always there, just listen. The ticking radar map also meshes well with this ambience, becoming droning until you hear this. Is that a zombie or just some harmless rat? You won't know until you check. This quiet and slow gameplay clashes perfectly for when combat gets initiated. Zombies are loud. They yell, scream, and bite at the player. Combat is also backed by this very loud and up-tempo background music, which attempts to get the player's blood pumping. Guns are loud, which will attract all the surrounding zombies, making combat with one individual all that more riskier. And the moment combat ends, it goes back to that quiet, paced gameplay. Lastly, I want to talk about the little survivor details. It's no mystery that ZombiU is oftentimes heralded as the one third-party game that used the Wii U's gamepad to full effect. When the player wants to look through their backpack, they are completely immobile. It doesn't pause the game, zombies can still attack the player, and they're forced to look and check down their backpack. The player uses the Wii U gamepad to scroll through their inventory, mark locations on the map, and aim down sights with scoped weapons. But what I think is even better with this is the fact that the survivor interacts with the weapons and backpack as well. As zombies are nearby and the survivor has to look through their backpack, you can hear them panic. Survivors get into long melee fights with zombies, they'll begin to scream, attracting even more zombies, but as an indication of how panicked they are. These small details alone just make the world that much richer. The survivor mode is a really nice touch. It takes what I said about the risk involved with having a character and amps it up even more, since once you die, and they're gone forever, and your game ends and you must restart. This can be frustrating if you are like me and you died at the last 75% of the game and now have to play through about 4 hours worth of content, but the game itself will most likely peak at about 10 hours, meaning it's a rather short experience. It also doesn't get that much more difficult, because once the player starts to unlock more guns, it makes dealing with hordes that much easier, and the game doesn't really decide to throw in any new things towards the player. There's a boss zombie that's introduced a couple of times and is optional to fight at a different period, but at the same time, they're just normal zombies that take much longer to kill. There's lots of glitches like this one, and lots of pop-up. There are plenty of glitches and weird obstacle interactions with zombies. But that doesn't mean this game's bad, and in fact, I think this is a relatively good game. It's pretty cheap, going at about $20 full priced for a PS4, Xbox One, and PC, and if you haven't been completely burned out on zombie games, it's one I urge you to try. It's not perfect, but I found myself having a good scary time with it. I want to thank you guys for watching. I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but I've got some videos in the tank right now that I'm currently working on. If you've enjoyed what you just watched, then I hope you subscribe. Thank you.